Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here on this December the 4th evening, the second day of what's been recently proclaimed Nova Scotia Human Rights Week, which is running December the 3rd to December the 10th this year in recognition of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This evening's panel discussion is housing and human rights. And the folks that have been gathered here tonight are generously sharing from their experience working in the field of housing and assisting individuals who are unhoused to find housing in Nova Scotia. Originally, we had a representative of the Federal Housing Advocates Office intended to be here. Unfortunately, they were unable to be present this evening. We will play a video in a few moments in place of them, not filling their shoes, but maybe giving a bit of background and context to the work of that office and to raise awareness of their work so that Nova Scotians are aware of the Housing Advocates Office as an avenue through which they can help to advance issues concerning finding adequate housing in Canada. My name is Jeff Overmars. I'm a communications advisor at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. And I'm pleased to be here with you all in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We occupy this land in the spirit of peace and friendship, in learning and sharing and understanding the cultures of the traditional people of this land. I hope that we can all reflect upon our own personal journeys toward truth and reconciliation and understanding what it means to build a future together in Mi'kma'ki. I'll take a moment just to point out the fact that we have ASL, American Sign Language interpreters, present today. I would like to thank them for their time and for being here. And as well, we have a live captioner who is providing captions in real time, which are of a higher quality than what you can expect from artificial intelligence these days, and ensure that the words that are being typed out are accurate and reflective of what's being spoken here tonight. We're doing this intentionally as a means of granting full access to individuals who may sign up to attend this event, and hope that they might serve people to access the information that we're sharing here tonight in the future. This event will be recorded and made available on the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission's YouTube channel following the event, and we encourage you to please share it broadly. We hope this will be the first in a number of conversations that we enter into around the subject of housing. As I mentioned, it's Nova Scotia Human Rights Week. This is the first panel discussion in a series that will be taking place this week. So I encourage you to visit the Human Rights Commission's website at humanrights.novascotia.ca/NSHRW. That stands for Nova Scotia Human Rights Week, to register for other events that are coming up and take advantage of a free film screening that we've arranged through a partnership with the Atlantic International Film Festival. Just to let folks know that this is a webinar conducted on Zoom, so there won't be the opportunity to put your hands up, ask questions, or turn your video on, aside from the Q&A feature, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen. Throughout the event, if you have a question, please write that question in the Q&A box. If you intend to direct at us at a specific panelist, please note which panelist you'd like the question to be asked to. Otherwise, we'll let folks weigh in as they see fit. I will ask that we do a quick round of introductions this evening. And what I'll do is I'll say the individual's name from the panel and perhaps ask them to say a few words about themselves, where they're coming from this evening, and why they feel it's an important subject to speak on, that being housing and human rights in Nova Scotia. I'll start with the first person that I reached out to discuss the potential of this panel, and that's Erika Shea, who's the Executive Director of New Dawn Enterprises in Cape Breton. Erika, if you introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. As Jeff said, my name is Erika. I'm calling in this evening from Unama'ki, Cape Breton. And we've been deeply privileged to work with an organization over the last 6 months who provides harm reduction services to members of our community to create from scratch a new housing project. And we will be able to provide 25 new units of housing, but we know that our community needs more than 100 of these same supportive, deeply affordable housing units. And we've encountered some, surprising and disappointing obstacles in our short time working together. And it's been a real reminder for us of the obstacles that some members of our community face in trying to access safe and dignified housing. So I'm excited to be here tonight. Thanks for the invitation, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Erika. I'd like to turn now to Sunday Miller, who is a property consultant at Akoma Holdings, Inc. Sunday, if you'd please introduce yourself and maybe briefly describe for us, who is Akoma Housing?
Hi, my name is Sunday Miller, as Jeff said, and I am working with Akoma, who has 320 acres of land that they wish to develop. And Veronica Marsman, who has been the property manager, has been a one-man team. And a dynamo, but needed some support. And I have experience with development, having been involved with the building of Africville and that historical site. I also have experience working with the homeless, and I was executive director at ADSIM as well. So we had gotten together and we chatted and we thought, okay, we recognize that within the Black community, they have made it quite clear that affordable housing is very necessary. It's a priority. And so with my skills and all of the things that were on the table, we decided that I could possibly bring a bit of help to Veronica, take a couple of the many, many projects off of her lap and work on them. And one of them, of course, was the RHI affordable housing that we just completed. It is, it's a wonderful thing to try and meet the needs of people and to problem solve. And we do acknowledge that housing is a major issue for everyone. And so that is what has brought me to Akoma, and the future awaits. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Sunday, and I look forward to hearing more about those many, many projects. As we go from east to west this time, I'll come back to you, Alison Coldwell, who works with the Canadian Mental Health Association in the beautiful Annapolis Valley. And Alison, if you take a moment just to maybe introduce yourself, indicate your role maybe and what that entails, and maybe how long you've been working in this area in rural Nova Scotia.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. I'm coming to you from Mi'kma'ki as well. So I've been in this sector for a while. My position as a coordinated access manager with CMHA Nova Scotia division has only been since last February, so coming up on a year now. Previous to that, I was the housing locator in the Annapolis Valley, and that entailed reaching out to private landlords to try to encourage them or guide them in supporting more vulnerable individuals in housing, in supporting their housing and their tenancy. Alongside that, I also work in some youth home situations. They're transitional homes that teach youth the skills to develop a good relationship with their landlord and maintain their tenancy, some homemaking skills that they might not have learned otherwise. I've kind of had my hand in a lot of pots here.
Thanks so much, Alison. And thank you for doing an interview earlier this evening with CBC Main Street about this panel discussion. And as well as you in that interview, we did have the Canadian Federal Housing Advocate participate in that interview. And we did have a representative of her office intending to be here today, but in the absence of having someone from the Canadian Housing Advocates Office here to speak about their work, we were provided with a video that we hope to play now with your help, Alison, to share your screen and play that YouTube video. And this video explains somewhat of the work of the Canadian Housing Advocate and how their work helps to build upon Nova Scotia and the federal government's protection of housing as a human right within federal and provincial human rights legislation. So in Nova Scotia, housing is a protected, or rather a prohibited area within the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act. That means that an individual cannot be denied accommodation based upon a protected characteristic such as race, gender, source of income, family status, sexual orientation, disability, and a number of other protected characteristics. But it's important to recognize the work of the Canadian Housing Advocates Office as an additional protection and an additional mechanism through which housing can be afforded to individuals as a human right. And I'm hoping that you can play that video now, Alison, and we'll pick up just after that with the beginning of the in-person discussion. So thank you.
Families thrive and succeed. It is central to human dignity, physical and mental health, well-being, and community. Housing as a human right can also be a precondition for the enjoyment of several other human rights, including the rights to work, health, social security, vote, privacy, or education. Everyone should be able to access housing that meets their needs without discrimination or harassment. The right to housing is not a new concept. Canada agreed to the progressive realization of the right to housing and an adequate standard of living in 1976, when its signature on the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights came into force. Housing as a human right means that everyone has the right to housing that meets a set of basic conditions. These conditions are recognized under international human rights law and go beyond Canada's current definition of core housing need. They include security of tenure, which means being protected from forced eviction, forced relocation, or harassment. Affordability, which includes protection against unreasonable prices or increases. Habitability, also referred to as suitability, which means adequate space for the family, proper maintenance, protection from the elements, and other threats to health and well-being. Access to basic services like safe drinking water, sanitation, heating, lighting, and emergency services. A location that is close to employment, childcare, education, and healthcare, and is not located in a polluted or dangerous area. Accessibility, which means people with all abilities have housing that accommodates their needs, as well as housing that is culturally adequate by respecting the cultural identity and ways of life of the occupants. Cultural adequacy also includes the housing or building design, for example, the layout of the home or using traditional or locally sourced materials. Sustainable and resilient communities require different types of housing to meet and support people in different circumstances. This includes emergency housing with temporary shelter, food, and other support services. For example, emergency shelters for people experiencing homelessness. Transitional housing that offers stable housing along with support services meant to be a short-term bridge between emergency housing and long-term housing. Supportive housing, which is long-term housing with support services ranging from supportive care to assisted living and residential care. Subsidized social or community housing, which is long-term housing that is geared towards the income of the occupants. Market rental housing, which includes long-term rental apartments, townhomes, and single-family homes available at market rates. And market home ownership, which includes home ownership and shared equity such as housing cooperatives. Many people in Canada still live in housing that does not meet these standards, and many do not have a place to live at all. In 2019, Parliament passed the National Housing Strategy Act. The Act recognizes housing as a human right and commits organizations and governments to reform housing laws, policies, and programs from a human rights perspective, and to involve communities in meaningful ways. The Act calls for the progressive realization of the right to housing. This means Canada must set specific timelines and goals in its housing strategy that make tangible progress towards the right to housing. It also means Canada must prioritize the most vulnerable groups and those in greatest need of housing while it works towards housing as a human right for all. To help develop and maintain this strategy, the Act establishes accountability tools, including the Federal Housing Advocate, housed at and supported by the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and the National Housing Council, part of the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The Federal Housing Advocate monitors how well Canada is meeting the goals set out in the National Housing Strategy and promotes and protects the right to housing across Canada. The Advocate is particularly focused on those with the greatest housing needs, such as women and children fleeing domestic violence, seniors, Indigenous people, LGBTQ2S+, people experiencing homelessness, people with disabilities, people with mental health or addiction issues, veterans, young adults, racialized groups, and newcomers to Canada. The Advocate plays a key role in amplifying the voices of those impacted by housing need and homelessness. The Advocate receives submissions from the public on systemic housing issues, conducts research into the issues, consults vulnerable groups and experts, and uses that information to make recommendations to improve Canada's housing laws, policies, and programs. The Advocate can refer key systemic housing issues to the National Housing Council and request that it forms a review panel of 3 council members to examine the issue. The review panel then holds a hearing and must offer the public an opportunity to participate, particularly members of affected communities and groups that have an expertise in human rights and housing. The panel then prepares a report with conclusions and recommendations for the federal minister, who must respond within 120 days and table that response in the House of Commons and the Senate. This mechanism is a way to target the most critical systemic issues, as well as urge the government to take action on them. It also gives members of affected communities an opportunity to participate in the process and to contribute to housing policy. The Advocate does not help with individual disputes. People needing help with an individual circumstance will need to go to the Landlord-Tenant Board, Legal Clinic, or Human Rights Commission in their province or territory. For those looking for immediate help, the submission form provides a direct referral to the 211 Community and Social Services Helpline or to 911 Emergency Services. The Advocate has several other responsibilities and accountability tools to promote the right to housing in Canada. These include research and engagement with stakeholders to report on systemic housing issues in Canada, monitoring, including monitoring the right to housing in Canada and assessing the impacts of federal housing policies, including the National Housing Strategy, and annual reporting to Parliament with recommendations on measures to address systemic housing issues. The Advocate can also submit recommendations at any time to the minister, who must respond within 120 days. A home is more than just a roof and 4 walls. It's a place to live in security, peace, and dignity. Together, we can help make the right to housing attainable for everyone in Canada.
Thank you, Alison, for facilitating the sharing of that video. And as I mentioned, the federal housing advocate, Marie-Josée Huel, was on CBC's Main Street this afternoon. And for anyone that wants to hear her speak a bit about this work, you can find that online as well. The advocate issued in October of this year an interim report on the current housing encampment crisis in Canada. She's expected to have that report completed and released in January of 2024. And I would encourage everyone to look up the interim report as well as watch for the issuing of the complete report in January. one of the messages there was the prioritization of housing issues and solutions for individuals who are the most vulnerable. Alison, when we first spoke, you shared with me some of the experiences that you have had working with some of those vulnerable populations. Among them, in your past, you've worked with young individuals, members of the 2S LGBTQ+ community, people with disabilities, as well as individuals experiencing addiction issues. Are you able to talk a little bit about that work and the complexity that you encounter in trying to facilitate housing and find solutions for these folks who are, struggling without housing, and in some cases, what has brought them to the situation where they're without a house?
Yeah, I can, of course. So like you said, there's a number of individuals who will access services around the Valley. And a lot of them, are in situations that it's just, one day they're housed and then the next day they're not. They don't realize that they're in a precarious situation when they're in one. And this is due in part to individuals who are, born into poverty in some contexts. In other cases, they're not. In some cases, we get individuals who have never experienced homelessness before. And that my partners have told me that that's new, that we haven't seen that before. And so people are just really unaware that they're slipping into this context. There are a lot of people who struggle with mental health issues, and it could be something as simple as, depression, which a lot of Canadians have. And, it could be that they're in between jobs, which in Nova Scotia, we know can happen really to anybody. There's not a whole lot of job security here, especially in the rural areas. And so they're in between jobs, and the landlords will see an opportunity to, they don't ask about what's going on. They just kind of jump on the opportunity to make a little bit more money. So they're being evicted, and then the price of their unit skyrockets. So in some cases, it's doubled. In a lot of cases, these individuals will first seek out the help of the tenancy board, which in a lot of cases is tremendously helpful. In other cases, we just can't get traction. And so they end up seeking out emergency shelters. And then from there, it's a long wait to re-enter the housing market. So it really is unfortunate, but it's so common now. It's very common. It's very easy to find yourself in this situation. And the unfortunate part about it is that, this is a really small community. And in small communities, you imagine that people are there to help. And there are a lot of people who are really wonderful at helping out and giving support to these community members in a lot of really creative and fun ways. But in another capacity, you see, there are business-minded people out there who, they're using that small community to sort of create word of mouth and create this environment where people are known to landlords. And so we can't even mention a name, for instance, without somebody shutting it down completely. In a lot of cases, just even a last name, people will say, no, absolutely not. We refuse to house them. So yeah, it's been very, very heartbreaking, because this is my community. These are my friends and family members. In some cases, it's really difficult to watch.
Thanks, Alison. You've mentioned some of the challenges that you faced in working with landlords, and you described it almost as a playing chess in order to negotiate with landlords potential housing options for some of the clients that you work with. Can you describe maybe some of the successes that you've experienced in developing these relationships, and maybe some of the specific additional challenges that you've had dealing with landlords within the community?
Sure. So we have had some really great success, which I'm always so grateful to those landlords. In one case, we had a landlord reach out to us and said, I'm housing some individuals and we would like to, secure a spot for them safely because they can't afford rent here anymore. We're just wondering if, there's a safe place for them to go. So he was really kind of proactive about it. And that was it was a one-off. I hadn't ever seen that before. But it's a great example of kind of what can happen in a small community. So these people are really looking out for one another. For them, I've had a couple of other landlords who were very savvy about strategically placing individuals in communities where they would be comfortable. So for instance, culturally appropriate accommodations were considered, accessibility was considered. So that's really great to see. On the other hand, we do have quite a few, unfortunately, the majority of landlords that we reached out to were not so helpful. In a lot of cases, like I said, they would shut it down just at the name. And, they would sort of ask just blatantly what the person's income was and where that income was coming from. And as soon as it's confidential, we're not allowed to tell them where the income is coming from. It's a protected right, or it's a protected facet. So we would say, we're not allowed to say that, or it's confidential, and all of a sudden that door shuts. There's no communication after that. It's not even a, goodbye or we'll connect you somewhere else. It's just automatically they don't connect. We've also had landlords who have reached out and asked if people are coming with children. They're not inclined to house families because, it might bother the other tenants, or it might disrupt the flow of their units, of their development, and they didn't want that. And people are getting very sort of sneaky about their discrimination. It's blatant discrimination, but they won't say it outright. A lot of times, they'll put on, so in very upfront ways, they'll put it on the application forms. So it'll say, we need your SIN number, we need a credit score, for instance. In another way, if we say, that's not really appropriate, then they just get smarter about it. It becomes more covert. So it's a tricky thing to navigate because you want to be very aware of what you're letting people see. And you're also trying really hard to build a relationship with that landlord so that you can, if one person doesn't fit, maybe another person will, for instance. And you don't want to break that connection down. So it is a lot of playing chess. There's a lot of navigation going on in that role.
Thank you, Alison. It sounds as though your job is a very high pressure one that involves a lot of very critical conversations between individuals who are seeking housing and those landlords who kind of hold the solution to the issues that folks are coming to you with. And I will come back to you in a moment, but I will come over to you, Erika. New Dawn Enterprises has recently been in the news, I think, around the housing development that you have instigated through your work in community. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what prompted New Dawn to kind of explore this approach to housing within this area of Sydney Cape Breton, maybe about the partnerships that were struck in that process and some of the challenges that you've experienced as well along the way to creating housing solutions.
Thanks, Jeff. About a year and a half ago, we sat down with our partner organization, the Ally Center. So both New Dawn and the Ally Center have been working in CBRM, Cape Breton County for decades, almost 50 years for New Dawn, almost 40 years for the Ally Center. So we are both well-established and are two organizations who feel a great alignment of our values. The Ally Center of Cape Breton is a harm reduction organization. They have the second overdose prevention site in Nova Scotia and the only one outside of HRM, safe needle exchange, everything and anything anyone who is in active substance use might need. And so we got together and we first had a conversation about trying to purchase a 9-room motel sort of on the outskirts of the CBRM. And shortly after that, we heard about the Rapid Housing Initiative opportunity, and that for the first time in 3 rounds of Rapid Housing Initiative funding, the CBRM was going to be one of the named municipalities in the municipal stream for that funding. And we were ecstatic. We had previously contacted CMHC about the non-municipal streams of Rapid Housing Initiative funding, and we're discouraged to apply because even the non-municipal stream was anticipated to go to large urban centers, of which CBRM is not one. So we were delighted to hear CBRM named. Unfortunately, our council was really underprepared and overwhelmed by that opportunity. And so they initially elected to send the money back to CMHC. There was an incredible uplifting and also overwhelming community response. And so the CBRM had to retract that plan and come up with an alternative way to keep the money. After quite a protracted and divisive series of presentations and conversations with council, New Dawn and the Ally Center were selected to build 24 new units of housing in the community. And so New Dawn has a number of parcels of land. We've been providing housing and commercial real estate for a long time. And so we selected a parcel of land that we felt met all of the important criteria for the future residents of the housing. So it was close to grocery stores. It was close to a series of community services like the food bank, the library, the YMCA. It was on transit routes, and have since dealt with quite a bit of community resistance and a small group of residents who have the ability to be quite loud in their opposition to this development. And so I can say quite happily, we've come through that. We have our building permit and construction is underway, but we were really taken aback by the demands coming from the opposed community members. The piece of land that we selected is adjacent to, not in, the Heritage District, the CBRM Heritage District, and they were really clear in their conclusion that this housing was going to spell the end of the Heritage District as we know it. And we were also quite taken aback at the level of detail that was being demanded by this group about who was going to be living there, what the intake process was going to be, what the staffing model was going to be, and insistence that there be 24/7 security guards on site. It was a really a series of really invasive demands that we weren't willing to acquiesce to. Our goal is to create housing that is dignified, supportive, but otherwise indistinguishable from the housing around it. And, you know, if you and I were to move into a new neighborhood, our future neighbors would not have any entitlements around our background, how we got there, how long we were going to stay, and what kind of services we availed ourselves of in the course of our day-to-day. Lastly, I will say, you know, in addition to dealing with that, you know, tumultuous, intense period of community opposition, and part of what was so disheartening was how volatile and discriminatory and quite open some members of the community were in their choice of language, and just really a dehumanizing approach to asking questions and making demands. We were surprised to learn at the end of all of that, it was the day before we were supposed to get our building permit, which had been a long and winding road, and we received a call from our director of planning to say that under the new municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw in the CBRM, which was only enacted in July of 2023, any supportive housing development over 9 units is prohibited unless the director of planning on a case-by-case basis approves those developments. And in order for him to do that, all residents within 30 meters of the development are mailed a form and the site plan and invited to provide feedback on that site plan. And this is only for supportive housing. There's no other housing type in the land use bylaw that has to go through this same formal obligatory feedback process for adjacent neighbors. And so I think another surprise, one which we were ultimately able to move through, but felt to us quite outdated for a document, a municipal planning document just enacted in 2023.
Thank you, Erika. You did mention that you were aware of some municipalities or regions within Canada that have taken action on that particular type of necessary consultation. Do you recall any details of maybe why they might have made that decision?
Yeah, so we were we discovered as we were going through this that in Victoria, British Columbia, that they have done away with consultations around supportive housing. They concluded that it's very rare, if ever, that good, new, productive, and respectful insights come out of consultations around supportive housing for vulnerable populations. I think they tend to follow a bit of a pattern where it's quite conflictual and can create more harm in the process for the future residents of these housing developments, who are really objectified and sort of put on display in a way. Yes, so certainly something we hope to see other municipalities have a conversation about. And I think it's a tricky, to engage or not to engage, and how to meaningfully engage, and when we have a right to be engaged versus informed, are all questions that we're sort of, turning over in our minds as part of this experience.
Thanks so much, Erika, for sharing those learnings that you've gleaned throughout this process and for the work that you're doing. Sunday, I'll turn to you and Akoma as a shining example of an organization that is centering community values in the development of housing. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about those values and about maybe what are the elements of success that you found in bringing community and levels of government together in successful partnerships in the development of housing options?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that we have done, it's a great question, Jeff, and we did a provincial needs assessment, housing needs assessment. And when I say provincial, for African Nova Scotian communities. And we were made very much aware that affordable housing and long-term care were priorities identified within the African Nova Scotian community. So we had done a lot of community consultation, and part of that is because, as I had stated previously, Akoma has 320 acres of land, which they have managed to hold on to since, a lot of the historical African Nova Scotian communities have had their land expropriated or have, it's been lost one way or the other. And so we recognize that once we saw the results of the housing needs assessment, then the solution was, we have the land, so let's build. Let's see what we can do, to meet the needs of African Nova Scotians. And so, it was wonderful in the sense that we had the community who had made it clear what it was that they were looking for. We had the land. So it was a matter of going out and, of course, what funds are available and applying for them, finding construction companies that want to support us and be involved. And so, we have identified that what we're doing is by us and for us, and that the whole point would be to grow capacity within the community. It started with the Kinney Place, with the remodeling of that, which had been the old home, which is now a business incubator. The school was turned into a center where people can have weddings and that sort of stuff. And in that whole process, we're interacting with different organizations and businesses within the construction field. And we're finding those who are willing to come on board and support and to be there. And one of the things that, of course, we made quite clear that if we don't have the capacity within the community for people to do the building, then what we request that you do is that you hire people from the community who have the skills, but not necessarily the experience. So if you've got someone who's trained as an electrician or different things, then you bring them on and you hire them. So one of the things that we've done is that, a lot of the subcontractors are people from the African Nova Scotian community, that the construction company is willing to bring under their wing and help them grow and develop. And, so from architects to planners to, engineers, electricians. So all of these things it's a way of building the community, growing the community. And it's almost like putting out, if you want to call it, streams of vision or streams of life as we sort of work together as a community. So the community now is not just those of African Nova Scotian descent. It's those who believe in what it is that we're trying to do and have come on board, from those who, that with the proposals that we submit and the funding that we get because of the things that we're doing. And I think, there was also the African Nova Scotian Road to Prosperity plan that was done, that was approved and supported by the government. And so there's also that whole aspect that we can say, the road to economic prosperity for people of African descent will not happen if they don't have housing, because that's one of the main issues, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Security. And so that requires a roof over your head. And the unfortunate circumstance, of course, is that, right from the beginning, with the presence of Blacks here in Nova Scotia, housing has always been an issue. As we know, the pit homes that the Black loyalists had to build in order to survive. And so housing has always been an issue. And even within our community, we have, if you want to call it, intergenerational housing, which, you know, based on the definitions of homelessness or precarious housing, that identifies. And part of it is because we as a community, we take care of one another, but couch surfing is not being stably housed. And so you might have someone with children, you know, living in the grandparents' home, and you've got a grandson with his partner and children, and you've got a daughter with their, but that's not being properly housed. And that's why it came up as there's a need for affordable housing, because, and it's an unfortunate circumstance. I mean, part of the condition within the African Nova Scotian is based on the racism that they endured, right? So I mean, it's very difficult to have and afford housing if you're unemployed, or, you know, even if with the educational system, if you don't have education so that you can get employment. So there were all of these sort of things on the back end that were creating this housing situation that I guess to a certain extent we just learned to live with. And so now that Akoma is in a position to be able to alleviate the problem, then we did apply for the Rapid Housing Initiative and was able to build 8 2-bedroom duplexes, so that for young families, so that we could house only 8, but that was a benefit. I think one of the challenges, of course, and the government is really working with us, is that the land has been zoned as urban reserve, which means you can't build on it. And so, I mean, they have given us like about 80 acres that we can use, that we can build on. But they recognize that that's not good enough, considering what the need is. And Veronica is one of these people. She goes, well, I'm just going to go forward and going to do what needs to get done. You guys catch up. And so, and even with the long-term care facility, I mean, the premier announced it, but where it's going is outside of the boundaries of where we're allowed to build. And so, you know, we're just doing, it's like people recognize the need, they see the land, and they recognize it doesn't make sense. We have a housing shortage. We've got zoning in place that's preventing, you know, housing to take place. And so they're working behind the scenes, working at trying to correct the challenge. And I mean, for example, part of the challenge is the infrastructure or the lack thereof. So, you know, we built, you know, 4 duplexes. And if we probably had the infrastructure in place, if we didn't have to put in septic, then we could have put more homes on the land. And so we're dealing with, you know, the size of the lots because of that, which means that you can't put as many buildings on. And the government is working. Like they said, okay, we understand, we recognize the need, we're going to work on this. Yes, it doesn't make sense. And so I think that's the encouraging thing, that they recognize that there's a need. We have the land and we're willing to do it. We're willing to put in the grunt work, write the proposals, make the connections, but you have to change these zoning rules and laws, and you need to dig deep, because what we're doing isn't just going to benefit the African Nova Scotian community, it's going to benefit the province. And so, you know, getting on board, and I think, you know, they're very much aware of that. And so they're working really hard. If we have an issue, and in lots of cases, it's a phone call, and they're saying, okay, how can we fix this? What can we do? And I know part of that is because of Veronica. She's very persistent, and she's very strategic, and and so we have, I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, we had the launch, where we sort of opened the homes, and 8 families are going in, and some of them are saying, it's like, we feel like we've won the lottery because now we're going to be home. We're going to be housed. My daughter's going to have her own room. And so, I mean, those are the sorts of things that make you feel good. And to a certain extent, we're not just providing housing, we are providing wraparound services, because we recognize if you've been precariously housed, that's traumatic. And so we are, family support worker in place to help people. And I know when I was looking at the Canadian Human Rights, and they were saying transitional and supportive housing, and I would say ours is a combination of both, because we are hoping that there's no timeline on how long they have to stay in the 2 bedrooms. But we're hoping that if we do what we need to do and we create a community of excellence, then they will be able to grow and develop, have hope, start dreaming again, and have a picture and a vision for their future. And we want to build 3 and 4 bedroom homes so that they can transition from the 2 bedroom to a 3 or 4, and perhaps have ownership or whatever. So there are many plans, as well as identifying seniors housing. And so there are so many things that we're looking at doing to help alleviate the affordable housing situation. Because yes, I agree, it most definitely is a human right, and it's been a human right forever. And I'm glad that people recognize that regardless of what your skin color is, or religion, or sexual orientation, or whatever, that you do have a right to have adequate housing. And one of the things that I have said, what we have created is not just affordable, it's good housing. Because affordable could be that you're in a basement, a damp basement that's rat infested with cockroaches. That could be affordable, but it's not good. And so what we are building and creating is good housing. And we are working at creating communities of excellence that give people hope and help them to become stable and to grow and develop and to be all that they have the capacity to be. Yeah, it's exciting.
It is exciting, Sunday, and thank you for sharing. And I will come back to you to hear more about some of the work that Akoma is doing in community, and perhaps how the word is spreading in other areas of Nova Scotia, if there's an opportunity to talk about that as well. Alison, I would just turn back to you for a moment, because when we first spoke ahead of this panel discussion, I think you identified a bit of a dichotomy almost between the different sizes of landlords. And when you're talking about available housing and housing options and the folks that are in this field of work, you've got the large landlords and you've got the small landlords, individuals who may own a couple of units in a rural community. Are you able to talk a little bit about kind of the experiences that you've had in trying to secure housing for clients in community, and maybe some of the different responses you've received from the different size landlords?
Sure. So, we have a mix here in the Valley. There are quite a few bigger landlords, bigger property management organizations that employ property managers to sort of do their interviews and process the application forms. In terms of the bigger landlords, we haven't had a whole lot of success, -1, with them. And I think the idea there is that these property managers are looking exclusively at minimizing kind of their strife, or their, minimizing, sort of trying to eliminate any kind of problems that they might have. And so the way that they do that is by profiling people. And that's the unfortunate way that it happens. And it's unfair. And I've called quite a few landlords out for that. But the smaller landlords, many of them also will do the same thing. The smaller landlords, though, have been more receptive. They're more community minded. They're, people who have been in the community for a really long time. They know people. They've had a lot of success in helping people. They connect really well with their tenants. And so those are the landlords that we sort of hone in on, trying to ask them to see if they'll support housing an individual. Yeah, other than that, I mean, we've had success, of course, with our nonprofits and our emergency housing. They've been absolutely wonderful. However, we only have one emergency housing service. We only have one shelter in the valley, and that's Open Arms. And they are at capacity constantly, despite doubling their capacity over the past year. So it's, especially in this weather right now that we're having, it's particularly dire. We're getting a lot of phone calls and emails asking, where else can people access shelters? And they've actually opened an auxiliary shelter in Berwick. So that was incredibly helpful, but that was just for the one night and during storm conditions. So the rest of the nights, people are kind of left to wander around and find alternative shelter. There's also, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Alison. I was going to say that in light of the weather that has just descended upon us, the timing of this conversation is kind of dire. And I think that you're seeing a lot of people who are having, extreme things happening to them in their tents right now. There was a man in Dartmouth that died just the other day due to exposure as a result of living in a tent. Are you finding that people within the rural community that you're in, are they leaving to find, or to seek out potential solutions elsewhere or in larger city centers? Or are you seeing a migration, or are you seeing people, sticking around in community?
In some cases, they will leave our community. In most cases that I've seen, in my experience, they don't. Their family is here, their supports are here. And we want to keep them here. We want to keep them close to their support system. If people aren't connected in their community, then they're more likely to fail in a tenancy. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So unfortunately, people are going into unsafe housing situations. They're either tenting in parks or forested areas, or they are reaching out to, former partners. Unfortunately, they have been reconnecting with partners where there's been some domestic violence, or they're going to, family members' home that might put that family member at risk of eviction as well, because they're also accessing housing support, and they might not be allowed to house somebody else there. So yeah, we have a mix. There's a lot of different solutions people come up with.
And are you finding that the municipal government and the provincial government are receptive in efforts that you're putting out there, or asks that are being come through you? Are you finding help from the different levels of government in this area?
Yeah, so we have made a few asks. Actually, the Homeless No More Committee has been incredibly helpful in pulling together data to support the asks that have been made, and the municipalities have been extremely receptive, which we're pleased about. What we do need more of, though, is sort of more collaboration amongst the levels of government. We don't see, the provincial government and the municipalities working together so much, nor do we see the federal working with the provincial. So it's kind of, we're getting there, but we're not there yet. I think there's still a lot of communication that needs to be done.
Thank you for making that point. Are you able to talk a little bit? You referred to Housing No More and the work that they've done For those that aren't aware, could you share a little bit about that committee and perhaps some of the data that they have gathered in recent years?
I can try. Homeless No More. I'm not a numbers person, so I'll try my best. So Homeless No More put together an agency-based count in our area with Acadia University. And what they did is they reached out to different nonprofits and different community organizations and agencies to get sort of a picture of how many individuals are experiencing homelessness and experiencing precarious housing at that moment. So that just happened in November of 2022. So we're coming up on a year now. And what they've recognized is that the bulk of people are actually in Kings County. So we have a very, very large population of homeless individuals in Kings County. So not unsurprisingly, we've, honed kind of our resources in Kings County and in Kentville. So that's the reason people are seeing, and we have a lot of community input, as Erika said. We also have a lot of community input saying, why are these resources popping up all over the place, and why are they in our backyard? And there's a lot of NIMBYism, which is not in my backyard. So people just don't want to see it. And unfortunately, it's there because it's a response to something that's taking place. You don't see it, but it's there. So, and then that data also kind of identified that there is a large group of youth who are struggling with homelessness. And in my experience, those youth kind of come from, when they're exiting child protective services. And so they're coming out of care. And we're kind of missing, that's something that needs to develop. We're missing that transitional piece. There are some organizations that can handle that, and they're doing a wonderful job, but we still need more. Of course, the 2S LGBTQ QIA plus community is one of the biggest, is represented kind of quite largely in that population as well. So we're seeing those folks kind of drifting about, and a lot of them are seeking shelter in unsafe conditions.
When we spoke, Alison, you mentioned specifically around the population of youth aging out of care, and that it's not something that happens suddenly. It's a trajectory that they're on. It's inevitable that they will age out of that care. Yet, nothing's being done, perhaps to root them, or some things are being done, but it's still happening that these youth are aging out of care without a place to live. And you described in some circumstances kind of the need almost for them to age out of care and to then become without home, because there's almost like a prioritization that exists. Can you talk a little bit about your observations there?
Yeah, so I did used to work in the youth sector, and when it comes to emergency housing, the youth will access sort of emergency housing and be there for a portion of time, kind of expecting to go back to their family home. But for whatever reason, one way or another, not often it will work out that way. And so we're experiencing, an influx of youth who are aging out at around 18, and kind of looking to access some supports. So we have developed some youth organizations. The Youth Outreach Association is one of them. They're doing phenomenal work with youth. They have a youth hub every week, and they invite social workers and income assistance workers, a lot of different community supports, to sort of engage in collaborative case management. And that helps support a youth as they're transitioning out. I don't know if all social workers are aware of this system or how it works, but then the other problem is that there's just so many youth in care. And so unfortunately, when they come out, they're just sort of stagnant on a list for a little while, couch surfing in the meantime. In some cases, youth will sleep in their car. So it's really unsafe. So yes, we do need more transitional support. And I think that, you know, we've got a great model already for it. So it would be really wonderful to see some more of those pop up.
Can you describe briefly that model that does exist for those that may be unaware?
Sure. So we have there's a supportive living program and there's a supported apartments program. The supported apartments program is a place where youth go to access housing. That is a supportive living environment where they have staff who are there in the house with them, teaching them things like life skills. They teach them tenancy, maintenance, how to engage with others. They could be involved in post-secondary education, or they could be working on something personal. So they could be working on their mental health. It could be, you know, whatever their goals are. So they go through sort of an intake process to determine what they need in that moment. So that's one of the models. The other one is a supported apartment program where youth can access services where they're living in a unit. It's not owned by the portal, but it is supported by the portal. So the portal is talking to the landlord and making sure that everything is, you know, everybody's safe and comfortable, and that if there's a breakdown in communication between the landlord and the tenant, that it's kind of filtered through a lens, through the support worker lens, which helps to reduce a little bit of the turbulence, I guess, is how I always put it. Yeah, so, and then that's helped quite a lot. They help with finances. So they, you know, they call and set up their electricity, for instance, or they'll get them hooked up to income assistance if they're not already. Just simple supports that people don't realize not everybody has access to.
Before I move on, could you just describe what the portal is for those that aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, the portal is a youth outreach organization. It's a wonderful, glorious place that I I love to promote. So they provide those two programs. They provide the supported living and the supported apartment program, but they also do youth outreach. They have a cultural connector program, which is pretty wonderful. And they have a youth space, so you can go down and hang out in the youth area, and it has a pool table and some video games. There's lots of programming that goes on, and they've got summer programs that they help youth with. And there's also the Edge on Employment that's in that same area. That's run by the Youth Center as well.
Thanks, Alison.
Yeah.
Erika, I'm gonna come back to you because New Dawn has entered into the planning for this project in close partnership with the Ally Center. Can you talk a little bit about that partnership? Was that a kind of a partnership that had existed between New Dawn and the Ally Center before this project? And maybe what has been the success in that partnership between New Dawn and the Ally Center?
Yeah, so New Dawn has operated supportive housing in the community for 20 years now. So we have a pre-existing supportive housing program called SHIMMY, which stands for supported housing for individuals who are living with or recovering from mental illness. And so we started that in 2004. That was in partnership with the office, or at the time, Department of Mental Health and Addictions. And so, you know, we tend to think that we're pretty good at owning, developing, managing homes, apartments, commercial buildings, and being a very open and supportive landlord. In our Shimmy supportive housing, all of the wraparound supports, the housing outreach workers, those come directly from mental health and addictions. And so we did have a bit of a template when we began our conversations with the Ally Center. So we've worked with the Ally Center in the past on, one-off projects here and there. This CBRM is a surprisingly sort of small, tight-knit community when it comes to organizations who are on the front lines or serving vulnerable communities. And so we joke because it feels like our presentation to council back in May was like our marriage proposal, and we're married now and we love one another, and we figured out who's going to shovel the snow and who's going to pick up the kids after school and who's going to do the cooking. So, it made imminent sense right from the start that the Ally Center, where they have relationships, deep relationships with the population that they serve, that they would design the staffing and programming model. They would employ the support staff, the social workers, the nurse practitioners, the occupational therapists, the whole team that's going to come and be embedded in this housing. So they'll be employed, hired, overseen by the Ally Center. And we have a property management team in-house of 5 folks. And so this new housing is being built literally in our backyard. So all of our offices face onto the 2 acres where this new housing is being built. So, just that proximity will certainly further entwine our 2 organizations together. The site where the housing will be built, it's about 3.5 acres. So we will have 25 units of housing. Right next to it is the Nudon Center, where we have about 45 businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies. And then right behind that is the Eldowig Arts Center, which we opened in 2020, provides affordable studio spaces for artists and emerging artists, and presentation and gallery spaces for arts-based programming and exhibitions. And so our long-term vision is one in which the residents really become an integral part of everything that the property has to offer, from arts to employment services. We have a maker space and a small business incubator. And so just knowing that this newest addition to the site is really going to teach us all so much and make us, change us in really important ways. The partnership with the Ally Center is it's been an absolute dream. And so I think over the years, we've gotten pretty good at identifying organizations who, work from the same place that we work from, and then knowing that those partnerships are the ones that tend to succeed and have a longevity to them. And so, we work quite closely now, working incredibly closely on the design, because although design, construction, development sort of falls in the Nudon bucket, there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of questions that need to be answered by the Ally Center, who know what the needs of the future residents are going to be. So what kind of entry system, sprinkler system, size of the rooms, type of the kitchen amenities, what should the common space look like? Do they need a nursing station? Where should the staff be positioned? What kind of lines of sight do we need on the different floors? How many accessible units do we need? And so it's like we just become more and more entwined with every passing day. And we're so I mean, our community would be so much worse off without the Ally Center. And so it's a real privilege to be able to work with them on this project.
Thanks, Erika. I love the image of the marriage proposal occurring at the municipal council meeting, and just the importance of relationships, even at that macro sort of organizational level. When you speak about the closeness of the organizations and the mutual learning, even that will occur through that relationship, I think that that's what we envision at the Human Rights Commission when it comes to our own personal relationships with one another in community. The closer that we can become and the more that we can learn from one another, the more enriched our lives become. And I think that that's exactly how organizations should be looking at one another as well, in terms of being able to collaborate on projects where each of you are bringing such incredible value to the table, and that you're leaving knowing more together. So thanks so much for articulating that in that way. Sunday, I'm going to come back over to you because I think that Akoma also embodies some of that approach to relationships, and you described that a bit in terms of just getting to know the builders and in developing relationships within the construction industry. And I hinted at it earlier, but the fact that your work is taking this approach, are you being are folks reaching out to you from other areas in Nova Scotia, other communities to kind of find out how they might replicate, or is Akoma taking their work into other communities, particularly within the African Nova Scotian communities in Nova Scotia?
I'm not quite sure that people are connecting with us because they want to access the housing. So, and people are calling us. I mean, for example, the long-term care facility that was announced in June. So we have actually, I've received phone calls from people in Ontario who, because they're thinking of coming home, but they're calling me because they're wondering, well, what about seniors housing? Are you doing seniors housing? I might not need the long-term care facility right now, but seniors housing, or people are calling regarding the rapid housing that we have done. So I guess it's one of those things. This is new for us, right? This is our first venture into developing housing. So for us, it is something that we would like to think that we can share with other communities in the province, because there are still some historical African Nova Scotian communities that have land that have housing issues, and we're more than willing to share what we've done and how we have done it, so that they can be their own solution to their community. I mean, one of the things that was a real help for us, because we don't personally do housing, like we aren't into sheltering people. So we worked with the North Preston Housing Fund. We worked with SHIM. We worked with ADSUM. We worked with Bryony House, Alice Housing. So those are the connections. Souls Harbor. Those are the people that we connected with, and we basically had a committee, everybody around the table, and putting forward names and going through things. So we sort of put out, if you want to call it, our tentacles to all of those that are working in the housing. And our saying is we want to be member two, number two. I mean, when you stop and you look at all the things that member two has done, and so we've had people calling because they've heard of what we've done. They haven't necessarily called to partner, they've called to participate. What we have had is lots of people calling us to partner with us on building things. So whether that's a solar farm, or the long-term care facility. So we've had people who've approached us to partner with us about doing things. And I don't know if that's answered the question or not, but
Yeah, it absolutely has, Sunday. Thank you. I do want to plug the availability of the Q&A window for anyone that's online that may wish to submit a question. And as I afford a bit of time in the remaining 10 minutes or so that we have for this conversation, I did want to go back to you, Erika, just briefly, because as we had spoken prior to this panel discussion, you brought something to the conversation that I don't think has come up lately, but it's around what's being referred to as the remedy, which is a resulting human rights remedy from a Human Rights Board of Inquiry that the Disability Rights Coalition was recently involved in. I'm wondering if you can just talk about that observation, perhaps as it relates to another project that New Dawn has been involved in for some time.
Yeah, so one of our nonprofits provides housing and supportive care to adults with physical and intellectual disabilities. So we have two developments. We have home living, which is a series of 7 duplexes where a caregiver and their family live on one side of the duplex, and up to 3 residents live on the other side. And then we have the New Dawn Guest Home, which is a 29-bed residential facility. And so, we've been just soaking up every little nugget of information that we can get about the human rights remedy so that we can be prepared to guide our residents through that process. Our residents at the New Dawn Guest Home, the average age is somewhere between 65 and 70. This has been their home for anywhere between 20 and 30 years. So this is going to be a really big change for them. And as part of preparing for this change, we connected with another organization in the community called the Breton Ability Center. And they're a much larger housing facility for adults with physical and intellectual disabilities. And they had first raised with us. So the human rights remedy has a 5-year timeline for deinstitutionalization. And so they had first raised with us, just being a year into this remedy, that one of their anxieties daily is that their residents may find themselves homeless and dealing with substance use disorders on their own in the future. Because one of the, I think, assumptions that tends to be made in the community is that individuals who are living with disabilities, physical disabilities, don't also have mental health diagnoses and addictions and substance use disorder. And so what we see at the New Dawn Guest Home and what our partners at the Breton Ability Center see is just an increasing number of complex cases for whom, if housing isn't really carefully thought through, the risk of homelessness is really high. And so our local shelter, the homelessness shelter in the CBRM, they're a 32-bed facility. They've been full every night in 2023. And so when we meet with the shelter, we're all part of an affordable housing and homelessness working group in the CBRM. The shelter raises their preliminary preparations to be able to accommodate residents on the other side of this deinstitutionalization, because they're also quite afraid that not enough thought is being given to quickly building the kind and volume of housing that is going to be required by this remedy. And so Jeff, you and I were chatting about this, and had the remedy been proclaimed 10 years ago, I think our collective anxieties wouldn't be so high, but it's especially challenging to imagine the deinstitutionalization in the middle of the biggest housing crisis I know we've ever seen, without just really active, consistent, province-wide construction of new apartments and housing, which, we've yet to see in our experience outside of rapid housing. Your design and construction is going to take somewhere between 24 and 36 months. And so when we piece that timeline together with where we are in the rollout of the remedy, it's going to get pretty dicey pretty soon. We've really got to start putting our minds and financial resources to building the kinds and the amount of housing that's going to be required so that we can avert making crises and homelessness worse as a result of a really necessary and well-intentioned remedy.
Thank you so much, Erika, for sharing some of the conversation that you shared with me in terms of the concerns within community as it relates to that particular issue that, as we spoke about, is coming at a time. It is the perfect storm in terms of the circumstances that we see ourselves in at this time. There is a question that popped in, and I'm leaning in because my vision is poor, my eyesight is poor rather, but and I'm not sure who this is directed at, but it was related to funding. Have individuals, perhaps this is Akoma and New Dawn, but have you reached out to solicit private investment or other sources of funding aside from those that have been made available by the government? And I can leave that to either Akoma or to you, Erika.
Go ahead, Erika.
You go ahead. Oh, you go ahead, Sunday.
We haven't done it. If you mean like going out to community and private funding in that way, we have not. We have reached out to other foundations, so not necessarily government, but we have reached out to other foundations for funding. I mean, and I do believe that, that's probably something that Akoma is going to start working on now that we have a bit of publicity, as you want to say it, may very well be in a good position to start that process.
Thank you, Sunday. Erika?
I'll say that, no one's ever going to get rich by providing affordable housing. That is just the nature of the requirements of affordable housing. So, you set out to build affordable housing so that you can keep rents low, and ideally so that you can set rents at 30% of income. And so to be able to provide deeply affordable housing, you do require non-repayable contributions, which come from government. We've had conversations with two different credit unions in the province. We had a really interesting conversation with the Van City Investment Bank that is now able to make investments across Canada. So they've expanded outside of British Columbia. We've had conversations with, the big five Canadian banks. And so certainly the big five and the credit unions in the province of Nova Scotia that we've talked to, it's all about cash flow and surplus cash flow, which is, virtually impossible if you want to make the housing affordable. I think the Van City Investment Bank, I think they, where they have started first with a commitment to affordable housing across the country and a commitment to making contributions to a certain number of affordable units. They're able to come to the table on the basis of their values first, before you get into the nitty-gritty of the financial statements. I think there's lots of projects and there's lots of, market and maybe even low market housing projects that could be a good fit for investors, if investors are prepared to provide slow, patient financing, and they're aligned with the outcome that an organization is trying to achieve.
Thank you very much for that, Erika. I'm just noting the time that we are at 8:30 and that this has been a really rich and wonderful conversation where each of you have shared so much, and I'm so grateful to each of you for being here this evening. There were a few questions that will be left unanswered in the Q&A, just in the interest of your time. I do want to go around just once to see if there's any last words from either of you, any of you, on the topic of housing as it relates to human rights. And I'll start with you, Alison. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I really appreciated the opportunity to talk about this extremely important, very pressing issue of housing as a human right. I want to leave attendees with, the impression that there is a way out of this. There is a way to help. And if people out there have properties that they are interested in renting at a fair price for the market, and also sort of a little bit under the market value, we have a housing locator who would be happy to receive your call or your email. And her email is Deborah, DEBRA, at portalyouth.ca. And if you're an individual looking to help out, there's also a couple of fundraisers happening. In particular, the coldest night of the year is happening in February through Open Arms Association, or through the Open Arms Association, and they are collecting funds. You can visit their webpage and find out more there.
Thanks,
Yes,
Alison.
thank you very much.
Quickly back to you as well, Erika, and where folks may go to find some information about New Dawn.
Yeah, the best place is, of course, our website, which is newdawn.ca. And on there, we have sort of a development progress tracking tool where you can stay up to date with all of the phases of the Rapid Housing Initiative project. So those 25 units will open in November of 2024, and the intake for those units is being administered by the Ally Center of Cape Breton. I would say, I think in terms of a parting comment, in Sydney now, certainly we are seeing just incredible numbers of our community living through visible homelessness, where in the past, we would always talk almost exclusively about our community being one where there was invisible homelessness. And just to say that it's so important that, although it's difficult, that we really expend our energies focused on the root causes of the homelessness and addictions crisis that we're seeing all across the province. Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff, Sunday, and Alison. This has been lovely to share the screen with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Erika. And Sunday, for final words from you and from Akoma, is there anything that you'd like to leave participants thinking about, and where might folks go to find more information about Akoma?
Yeah, so in regards to Akoma and our development, what we're doing and what's going to be available for people to stay on top of what's happening there, then they could subscribe to Akoma's newsletter at akoma.ca, because they write everything. They give the criteria of what we're looking for, the type of units that we're working on. So we have a newsletter that comes out every month that sort of keeps people up to date as to what's going on. We're hoping that we're going to be able to provide diversified housing. So we've done our 2-bedroom rapid housing, and like I say, you know, going to 3 and 4 bedroom and perhaps some ownership and as well as rental. And, but, you know, Alison, your comment regarding the youth and the, you know, and uh, them aging out, you know, that is a major issue. And I guess, you know, we have the family center, right, at Akoma as well. So, and because that's what they used to do, is take care of children up until the age of 18. So perhaps that's something that we might even be able to think about and throw into the mix, you know, on Akoma lands. You know, what better place for young people to be surrounded by seniors and young families and mixed groups and all that sort of stuff, to have that guidance and access to training and support. Yeah, thank you. It's great listening to both of you and hearing what you had to say. And maybe Erika, I'll come visit you in Cape Breton, check out New Dawn.
That would be spectacular. We would love that.
Thank you, Sunday. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Erika. Thanks to our ASL interpreters and to our CART transcriber. Have a nice evening, everyone. This recording will be available on the Commission's YouTube channel tomorrow.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you all.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.